This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
Either a person spends their life attempting to get into the spotlight or hiding from it. It's common to want what you don't have. Sometimes what life presents us with is out of our control. The danger comes when you try to work against your natural gifts. Anything that's given, if used properly, can be an asset. All you have to do is swim with the tide rather than against it. Once you accept who you are, all that you're given becomes your superpower. You use your assets to your advantage and finally grow into yourself. A whole new world is opened up simply by accepting how you were born. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Failace, and welcome to the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's what we do, and that's the stories that we highlight. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, please comment, and now you can join. Ring the bell to get notified of all of our new content, and don't forget to like us on all social media so you can find out exactly it is what we're up to. On this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we welcome Blake Rosell to discuss the suffering of the big man. Blake's stature pretty much matches his personality. I think Blake might be the tallest guy we ever had in the studio. Blake, thanks so much.
Kevin, thanks for having me on, and it's a pleasure to be up here, and I love the studio, by the way.
He turned sideways to come in the door.
I know, he's got a duck. It's like I in college, Giants had their summer camp at my college, and I was with John Elliott. John Elliott used to let the duck get through the door. He was just a giant mammal. How was your drive up here? Listen, I just made that drive on Saturday. It sucks.
Yeah, you know what? It wasn't too bad. It was cool seeing New York City for the first time in a couple months. They normally don't come up this way, but it was really neat being able to see the city, and I got lucky all the way up until I hit the city, and then coming around and hit a little traffic, but it wasn't too bad.
See, South Jersey traffic's the same as North Jersey traffic. I don't care what anybody says.
But then you hit the Central Jersey, and you fly right through that.
No, not on Saturday. I was down there on Saturday. I saw Chris DiStefano at Borgata, and it took me 3.5 hours to get down there, 3.5 hours to get back.
And from where you're at.
Yeah. It was awful. It was awful. I hate that ride.
I think New Jersey in general is just like a congested area, right? You're going to hit traffic north, central, south, wherever you go.
Because the roadways are archaic. They didn't, when they first built those roadways, they didn't know there was going to be that many cars on the road.
But the problem is they keep expanding the traffic. The more lanes actually makes more traffic, because eventually it's got to come back down. And I always tell everybody, if you were to look at, say, the Parkway from a helicopter, it would look like an inchworm. You know, fast, slow. It's aggravating as hell.
But listen, it's not as bad as Long Island. I went to Long Island a couple weeks ago. It took me almost 2.5 hours to get to the place I wanted to go to. On the way home, it took me an hour and 5 minutes.
Unfortunately. Well, let's give a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody as police, but we do trust them. So if you're looking for a car, go to toyotahackensack.com. Let them find you a car. They're real good guys over there. Ask Mike's father. He'll tell you all about it. You know, the thing, you gotta pull the thing down in order to
He still doesn't know what all the buttons are.
So, Blake, each week we take a question from our audience. This week's question comes from Annie356. Says, why do you like doing your show so much? You have your own radio show. I know you it's a labor of love, because if it's anything like this show, it's not a living, but it is a labor of love. So I'm going to leave this one to you. Why do you like doing your show so much?
Well, that's a great question. And I take this back to when I was younger, and I was always told, you got the personality where you can be in front of the television, or you can be in front of the in front of the mic. And I was always told that by family members, friends, and all that, all the people close to me growing up. And obviously, as you know, we discussed before, on my program, I went to school for all those things. But something really struck me to want to hear other people's stories and hear how they kind of developed into their careers, right? And not just so much hearing about what they actually do, but the camaraderie and the conversation. I enjoy listening to people. I enjoy the conversation and being able to hear what these people have to say. And my love for the show is being able to take, what these people are saying and just kind of give that experience to others, right, who are listening, my audience, and where they're able to kind of, maybe make their dream come true one day. Or if they were thinking about doing the profession that whatever guest I had on, and they'd say they're a famous DJ, or they own a restaurant or a business, or they're an actor. How do you follow those steps? How do you become, in there? How do you become the big thing one day?
You're looking for the secret sauce in each one of them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really what drove me to do my show was to kind of find out about different people's backgrounds and find out about what people do, how they got to where they got, right? And I think that was my idea for the show was it originally going to be, okay, I'm going to say my original thought was, since I'm down in South Jersey, I'm going to say what's happening this weekend in Atlantic City. I'm going to say what restaurant to go to, restaurant week. Oh, the boat show's in town, right? And I may still do those events, or I may still recognize those events on my show. But I turned it more into a talk show platform where it's kind of like a podcast, as you know, and a live radio show every Wednesday. But what I enjoy about it is the conversation most of all. And that's what really drove me to want to do the show, was a conversation with someone I've never met before, or maybe someone I've known for a while, but I didn't really know much about them, and I got to discover more about them. My audience got to discover more about that individual. So I think that's the passion behind understanding people's stories and having them broadcast that to an audience. I think is really why I did the show, and I've been really enjoying doing that over some time now, being able to hear from the guests.
I think it's just the beginning. Mike, what do you think? Why do you like doing the Suffering Podcast?
I think you hit the nail on the head, though. It's getting to know people, getting to know the guests. Most of the times when a guest comes in here, it's the first time we've ever met, like face to face. And you get to know what they're all about and what their story is. Right. And once they get their story out, yours is a little different. Yours is like people who built businesses and became. Ours brings people down to their depths.
Right.
And to see them come back up, and we have a great relationship with pretty much everybody that's ever been on this show.
Yes, that's true.
Just for an hour of sitting here talking to them, and that's what I really enjoy about it.
I really love hearing the stories. I love letting them release their own traumas or their suffering, whatever their life is about. But what I really love is you get somebody who's never been in front of a microphone. I know Mike is getting this joy too. You get somebody who's never been in front of a microphone. And your job as the host is to make them forget that this microphone's there, that the cameras are over there, and really get in deep as if we're just sitting around having a cup of coffee and pouring ourselves out and trying to work through some issues. So I love when that happens, because 99% of the time we're up and everybody's like, wow, an hour's up already.
I was just most of the time at the end of it, everybody's like, wow, that was so fast.
Yeah, it's great. It's a wonderful feeling.
It's like three people sitting around the table bullshitting.
The one thing I don't like about doing this show is I do not like when people see me. Oh, yeah, I watched you on the show. I'm like, oh, God, I don't. Because we talk about some, and we're boneheads in here, and we say stuff that's off color, and like, how are they going to react? You never quite know.
Did I really piss? I saw you on the show. You really pissed me off that day.
You really pissed off Jerry Cooney. Good job.
And Clark.
Annie, thank you so much for sending that in. Keep sending in your questions. We will try to get them on the air. So, Blake, you're a big man coming from South Jersey. I know we have some mutual friends because of how you grew up. We've spoken a little bit about it. Everybody thinks that it's a shore town. First of all, you got to remember, you're in North Jersey. Where you're from, it's the beach, where everybody up here thinks it's the shore. But why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, a little bit how you grew up?
So coming down, growing up in at the shore area, right? There's always a difference between the Jersey Shore and, people say, well, North Jersey, South Jersey, two different things, right? And my whole life I've been hearing, well, North Jersey, you have the New York people that go to the shore, right? Your Long Island, your Staten Island, your Bronx, whatever, come from New York. Not only go to New York beaches, but go to North Jersey beaches, right?
Seaside, Point Pleasant, Belmar.
Yeah. Asbury Park. But in South Jersey, it's a little different.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah. It's all PA.
It's Philadelphia people.
Philadelphia people. Bleeding Green, the Eagles, the Phillies, Flyers, Sixers. It's mainly Philadelphia people. And outside the Philadelphia, they call the suburbs or the main line. You talk about Villanova area. Where St. Joe's University and all the media, Broomall, PA, Malvern, PA.
King of Prussia.
King of Prussia, yeah. Where I grew up in Margate is located about 10 minutes from Atlantic City. I'm in a little short town. And
Lucy the Elephant. That's all you got to say. On the beginning of Vacation itself is a picture of Lucy the Elephant.
Real quick, what's funny? Every time I say Margate, most people who aren't from the area have no idea. But one thing that most people will say is Lucy the Elephant.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, how do you remember an elephant? I mean, it's a big deal. It's like a trademark for Margate. It goes back to the 1800s. But But really, the elephant's all you took from Margate?
I mean, Margate is such a beautiful place, too. All I remember is the elephant.
Yeah.
So Margate, when I was growing up, was like the Jewish section of South Jersey. And then now I believe it's Longport, if I'm not mistaken. But that was where the concentration of the Jewish community lived. And now, you know, because even though they were Jewish, they all went to Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
They all went to Holy Spirit.
Or Atlantic City High.
Yeah. Back, so you got to remember this. We're not talking new Atlantic City High.
Right.
The old Atlantic City High. And the old Atlantic City High was not the nicest place in the world. Of course, I had to go to Holy Spirit because my sending school was Pleasantville, and we all know how that is. But as it turns out, I coached with a guy that I played against in junior league football in Pleasantville. Yeah. So, but Margate's an interesting place because it's got some of the most pristine beaches around. It's got some great bars, great restaurants, and it was always the upper class.
I was going to say it's affluent down there.
Oh, it is. Even Ventnor used to be that way. I think Ventnor's changing now.
Yes, in terms of
demographics, it's people moving out of Atlantic City are starting to move in there, and it's unfortunately bringing some of the bad element with it.
Yeah, so Ventnor still has from my experience, Ventnor was like a decent area to live. Wasn't real bad, but I know what you're saying, like the inflow from Atlantic City a little bit into like deep into Ventnor can be a little dicey. But for the most part, Ventnor is really still a big destination for second homeowners from Philadelphia. Margate has like I said, has a lot of people from Philadelphia have second homes, Longport, and also Ventnor too. Is a big summer destination. Ventnor almost has as much as Margate, if not, a little less than Margate as far as people coming in, tourists and stuff like that. So it's when you get into Atlantic City, and certain sections of Atlantic City can be a little dangerous depending on where you're going. But
is Margate more of a residential or second home place?
Margate, I want to say, is still residential, but it's been shifted. Yeah. Now, when my dad was younger, growing up in the area, it was strictly like residential, and he had a lot of kids in his graduating class from like the 8th grade middle school in Margate. And that number diminished as time went on, and we, come to present day. And it seems to be a lot more second homeowners, but still a pretty good year-round presence, I would say. But there's some short towns that you go south, like past Ocean City, like Sea Isle, Avalon, Stone Harbor, Wildwood, and Cape May are kind of like deserted in the wintertime.
Oh, yeah. So Avalon, I used to work in Avalon. I used to work at a place called Jack's Place, and they had 2 cops in the winter, and in the summer, 30 on a shift. Most of them were specials, of course. But in Margate's changing a little bit. So when I grew up, Margate's where all the mobsters live. Okay, some big events happened there. That's where Vincent Falcone was murdered by Phil Leonetti. That's where Chucky Merlino
allegedly
lived. Yeah. No, it absolutely happened. He said it in open court. This is open record. It's where Chucky Merlino lived. That's where Joey Merlino grew up, who is now the current alleged mob boss of Philly. But that's where because it was the wealthier area, and that's where they hung out. That's where Scarfo used to dock his boats and all that stuff. So it has some dark history, but it has some interesting history that everybody's interested in. I don't know what it's like now. I got to tell you, I don't know what it's like now, if those stories even circulate around Margate.
I think what it was back in the day was completely different. To a little bit what you were saying, obviously that was more like my father's time, my grandfather. So I can't really speak on that. More present day, I think that's kind of shifted. I don't think you see that much anymore. From my understanding, just kind of growing up as a kid in the area, it's just kind of just more like a lot of people I would say second homeowners. You don't really hear much buzz about those kind of things, right? I just think it's a little different as time went on.
They were great neighbors to have. I mean, we worked in towns in North Jersey. We all knew who the mobsters were as a cop. But they were great to have as neighbors because they were ultra respectful. They never brought crap home with them.
And it makes for a safe neighborhood.
That's it. That's it. So by me saying that they lived there, it actually made it a good neighborhood.
Right.
Like you knew it was a good neighborhood. And then they went to Atlantic City and they did their stuff. Mm-hmm. So where'd you go to school?
Well, in Margate, I went to, there's 3 schools. Actually, it's funny. Now, one of the schools is a public works building. But so now there's only 2 schools. There's the elementary school, which is like, I believe now kindergarten through, I want to say 5th grade or 6th grade. I want to say 5th grade. And then now in Thai school, which is the middle school, is still 6th through 8th. So I grew up in, going to the three schools. Union Avenue School was the kindergarten through second grade, and it was called Union Avenue because it was on Union Avenue in Margate, and now it's a Public City Works building. So it's funny, you think a little town, right, like Margate, why is there three schools? And I always laugh growing up, and even like me and my friends, and like, why do we have three schools? I mean, you really could just fit every kid in one school. It's not that big of a town, right? So I went through all my grade schooling in Margate. And then for high school, I attended Saint Augustine Prep, which is the good old home of the Hermits out there in Buena Township, Richland, New Jersey. And we had the rivals of Holy Spirit.
Holy Spirit High School, Spartans.
And it's funny, my dad actually graduated from Holy Spirit. I think we talked about that before on my show. But yeah, Holy Spirit was a big rival. Middle Township High School down in Cape May Courthouse was always a big rival. Yeah. Two legendary coaches, Coach Tom Farraco, who's retired now, was the long-term time coach for Middle Township boys basketball, which I'm sure you remember, Mr. Coach Farraco. I do,
because I actually almost transferred to Seton Hall, or not Seton Hall. Sorry,
you can transfer to Seton Hall.
I got Seton Hall Prep on St. Augustine. I almost transferred there. I think my sophomore or junior year. But that ride, holy cow, that ride! It was like 40 minutes for me. I said I'm not going to handle 40 minutes. So that's the only reason I didn't go. But I have some good friends, like Tom Coyle, who was the girls basketball coach. I grew up with his son Brian, who I believe now is coaching there. So I had some friends that went there, and Mark Reardon was the football coach. Was it Mark Reardon or Charlie Roman? I went to school with both of those guys. They were 2 or 3 years older than me, so I have ties to all that area. I still have ties to all that area, but I just don't go down there that much.
Yeah.
But so I'll bet you St. Augustine's was licking their chops when they saw you, because I don't know when you hit your growth spurt, but I guarantee it wasn't last week.
Let's just say, how big were you in 8th grade? Because they, like you said, they had to be licking their chops.
So I was always a big kid growing up. When I was graduate 8th grade, I believe I was 6'1". And my growth spurt actually happened when I was at St. Augustine's. I want to say the end of my sophomore year, a little bit of my freshman, but mainly my sophomore year. I went from like a 6'1" to like 6'6". And maybe a year and a half span, I grew about 5 inches. And I got a funny story too. I remember at the end of practice one day at the prep, and we were just at the end of practice every day we'd shoot foul shots for about 20 minutes. We used to have long 3-hour practices. They were tough. And at the end we'd finish with foul shots before we brought it in for the day, and we held it up. And this is the first time I ever really attempted to dunk the basketball, right, at basketball practice. And I'm lining up on the foul line. I shoot my 2 foul shots. And I said, you know what? It was always a theme or a thing to go do a layup after you shot 2 foul shots. And then you pass the ball to your next teammate in line who's going to shoot his 2 foul shots. So I just shot my 2. And then always they give you like one more bounce pass for a layup before you, and then you lay the ball up and then you give it to the next teammate. So instead of a layup, I said, you know what? I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling like pretty energetic right now. I'm
springy,
loose. I'm feeling a little loose. I'm going to try to dunk this thing. I didn't really say anything to anybody. My teammate just kind of thought it in my head. So I took a couple dribbles.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. After my shooting, I was lost. Inside my head was pure chaos, and I really needed help.
You find yourself having trouble sleeping. You have trouble concentrating. You have trouble going through the normal daily routines because you don't know what's going on in your head.
It turns out one of the best ways to quiet your head is to talk it out.
And therapy is a great way to do that. You can clear your mind. You can talk to people who know what's going on, and you can really get all those negative thoughts out of your head.
Mike and I both wouldn't be here without therapy.
There's a lot of benefits to therapy, too. You get to talk to people who have gone through similar situations that you're going through, and it helps get all of those demons off of your chest.
Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you want to switch therapists at any time, there's no additional cost. Get a break from your thoughts with BetterHelp. Go to BetterHelp.com/suffering and get 10% off your first month.
That's BetterHelp.com/suffering.
And I jumped up there and I dunked it with one hand. I'm like, oh my God, like I didn't even think I was going to do it. And even my teammates are like, oh, okay. Like, wow, look at you. I guess like they all have like, when we were kids slang, like, look at you, or okay, you got hops, or whatever they said back then when I was younger. But it was like a proud moment for me. I was kind of like excited. And because I don't remember ever doing that before, and it just kind of happened out of nowhere.
So you grew, but you didn't really outgrow your body. Because we had a guy that lived by us. He sprouted up in like 1 year. He was the biggest, clumsiest. He had to grow into his body, and he couldn't do that in high school.
And that's true too. Like even growing up, like I remember like some real tall guys, even taller than me, kind of had a hard time fitting into their body, maybe didn't get the footwork down when it comes to different post moves or whatever. But I was kind of fortunate, and I've always had like trainers, and I've always played year round. I was fortunate to be able to, kind of grow into my body pretty well, where I didn't feel like a clumsy.
Awkward.
Exactly.
Yeah, they get awkward because, I see that now when my son's in 8th grade, and oddly enough, if my son hits a growth spurt in sophomore year, I'm going to lose my mind because I'm tired of buying him pants. He's 6'1" now. He's 13. So I watch him, and I watch him real close because big guys, people don't realize something. Big guys get picked on every bit as much as little guys because they test them. They test them. They're like, let me see what this guy's made of. And then one day, that big guy realizes that, wait a minute. They realize how big they are.
Right.
And he's like, but most of the time they're gentle giants. Most of the time. Thank God.
It's kind of like poke the bear syndrome.
Yeah. And, I tell my kids, I said, just beware of that. Beware that people are going to test you. Little guys are going to test you. They're going to try to act tough. Just remember, you're bigger and you're stronger than them. It doesn't mean you got to show it all the time.
It's easier to punch down than punch up.
Yeah. Did you ever get tested?
I never really had a lot of instances where kids mess with me or I had to defend myself. There was only it wasn't a couple times, maybe, somebody, a kid thought he was like a jokester or thought he was funny. And I remember I was actually on the beach with my mom, and this was like around sunset, and I knew the kid from school, and he had a reputation to be kind of like a goofball kid, a bad kid. And he just kind of like, he would test everybody. So he was saying something to me or kind of like trying to mock me or kind of provoke me. And like, I had a really good like temper. I just kind of laughed it off. But then he was saying some things that were kind of getting annoying, like starting to aggravate me. So it's funny. I started to chase after him, and good thing my mom was at the other end of the beach. She goes, "Blake, stop right now. Where are you going? Stop." Like she kind of had an idea that I was going to go after this kid. And obviously I didn't touch him or nothing happened. I just kind of stopped and he kind of ran off to wherever he was going. But I mean, I never really had anyone like physically try to lay their hands on me. And one thing I always hated, and I still hate, like anyone who tries to be a bully.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's one thing, even like when I was younger, one thing that I couldn't really stand, and it wasn't just because I felt like I was a big guy and I was macho, I was better than everybody. You could be 4'11" and hate bullies. Doesn't matter if you're 7'2" or 4'11". Anyone who has that idea that they don't like the idea of bullying, have my hat off to them, right? Hats off to them and I never really was a fan of that, a fan of bullying.
And on the flip side, you could be 4'11" and be a bully.
Yeah.
Well, that's where most of them are, because they have
Napoleon syndrome.
They got little man's disease. Yeah. It happens. It's real. And people look at you and they're going to think, well, he doesn't get messed with, but that's not always true because I've seen it more times than not.
Yeah.
One of my proudest moments in football, it was an Indian kid. And first year playing football, he's a nice kid, like super, super nice kid. And one of the kids who was like this bad kid was testing him and said a very negative thing towards him. And I heard it, and I pull him aside. I said, "Don't you ever let anybody talk to you like that." Next thing I know, the kid says something else. He goes, "Go fuck yourself." And I go, "Good for you, man." Exactly. I was so proud of him. I was so proud of him because this is not the kid to step up on somebody.
Right.
But he learned. I said, "You're bigger than this kid. Don't bully him, but don't take that stuff from anybody."
Yeah.
And so I'm very conscious of that. Mm-hmm. I'm very conscious of that stuff. So you basketball, no football? Man,
I never played football, and I think about it till to this day.
Left tackle.
Oh, D-end. D-end.
No kidding. Just stand at the line like this.
D-end, putting pressure on the quarterback. He's not throwing over top of you.
Yeah. I always, I played baseball and basketball growing up, basketball being my specialty that I played in college, but I never played football. And I look back on it like, should I have played? I just never really had that, like the way I think now, in my young adulthood, I didn't really think, obviously, when I was younger, and most of the times you don't, because you mature as you get older. But when I was younger, I really never had interest in football. But if I had my mindset now at 13, 14, that I do, then when I was 13, 14, I probably would have been like, you know what, let me get out there, let me try it. Let me go try to be a tight end or be a D end on defense and see if I have the speed or, did I even play for a year? Did I like it? Do I like it? But no, I never played. And people always ask me, they're like, let me get. I mean, you're a big guy, man. Would you play football? Football player? I'm like, no, basketball player. And they're like, you never play football?
Either or.
Yeah.
Either or. You know, listen, they got Manute Bol in a tribe in Africa, and then he tried to dunk and broke all his teeth.
I honestly think the reason you probably didn't like football is you're born in Eagles territory.
Oh, well,
so you
God. You grew up in the Donovan McNabb era, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Donovan McNabb, Brian Westbrook, and
Brian Dawkins,
B-Dawk.
Yeah, we still got the best quarterback in the league right now. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care. So I actually put my foot in my mouth. We had a Philly girl in here, and it was going to air right about the time the Super Bowl happened. And I'm like, you know, congratulations to the Eagles, you know, because it's a month ahead of time. And, yeah, I put my foot in my mouth with that one. But, you know, it could have gone either way. So after high school, you graduate. Did you go play ball in college?
Yeah, so I went to a couple exposure camps where they call it's like this, they have to call AAU
stuff. Yeah.
Yes, and I was fortunate enough to be in part of some team camps, some individuals exposure camps up in Reading, PA at Albright College, which they think called Hoop Group, which I know is Hoop Group's big up here. I know they have I'm trying to think where up in New Jersey.
Probably went to a couple Boo Pergamon camps.
Yeah, well, I also went to a Bob Hurley camp when I was younger, too.
Bobby Hurley. So
yeah.
Do you remember, I don't know, they haven't done the Seagull Classic at Holy Spirit in a long time.
They actually brought it back.
They brought it back, okay.
About, 6-7 years ago.
There's a whole reason why it got canceled, because there was a shooting out front.
Yeah, I heard about that.
But Bobby Hurley played at the Seagull Classic. They came up from Jersey City.
St. Anthony's in Jersey City.
Yeah, they played at the Seagull Classic. A lot of pros went through there. I mean, it was Father Lyons who ran that.
Right.
And I think Father Lyons just passed, as a matter of fact. But that was a big deal. And Boo Pergamon, I think Boo's still around, if I'm not mistaken.
He might be. I don't think I'm not sure. I don't want to be wrong on that, but I know the name.
Boo was like a basketball god down there for whatever reason.
Yes,
I don't know why.
I heard the name many times.
I don't know why, but he had a camp, and teach you how to dribble both hands, and you got shorts if you were there for 10 days, and it was like crappy.
Well,
shit.
that was Bobby Hurley Sr. too.
Yeah,
he was the coach at St. Anthony's. He was like the god.
Yeah,
him and don't want to bring up Seton Hall Prep again, but Bob Farrell. They were the two big coaches.
Yeah,
up North Jersey.
And actually, hats off to my high school coach who down at Saint Augustine's. He's still there. I think he's going on his 47th or 48th season now. Coach Paul Rodeo. He just got the all-time winningest, or second, I think behind Bob Hurley. Bob Hurley Sr. is the winningest coach in New Jersey, and Coach Paul Rodeo is second behind him in the most wins, 1,000 wins and most wins in New Jersey, I believe. Yeah. So they were good, and they're good friends too. Yeah. And so I was able to attend Bob Hurley Senior's camp when I was younger. I did some other exposure camps, and one thing that I thought was really cool as like a high school athlete, looking to go play in college. After I left that exposure camp, I had a really good week. And I remember all the letters and emails started flowing in. A lot of them some were procedure routine, and some were like in-depth. I want to say between 20 and 25, a little bit over 25 emails and letters, combined from different colleges that saw me that week. Hey, Blake, we thought you had a great week. This is so-and-so from, the University of Sciences in Philadelphia. What the school that recruited me heavily was DeSales University, which is Pennsylvania, like Center Valley, right by Bethlehem, Quakertown area. And the Moravian College, and then a couple Division I, a couple Division II, and a lot of Division III schools. But I thought the best offer that after narrowing it down was DeSales University, where they were going to give the most what they could as a Division III school. They call it academic package, where they could really legally give you. They can't call them athletic scholarships, but they can give you an academic and pay for most of your tuition. So that worked out best for me.
And they have access to all the coaches have access to all different grants. They did it in my college.
Yeah,
and that's D3 football.
They're doing that in the high schools now too.
Yeah, well, they have to, because the damn things are getting too expensive.
Get that right.
Yeah. So I ended up playing at DeSales University 1 year and a half. And I made the decision to transfer back to home to South Jersey. And I finished my last 3 years of schooling there, graduated with a communications degree, a Bachelor of Arts degree, and I played for the Stockton University, the Ospreys down in South Jersey. Stockton. And they were the Richard Stockton College in New Jersey for years. Yeah. And then when I went there, after a year, they transferred over to Stockton University, made a university.
You know why? Because there was one out, Stockton California had a problem with it. That's why. It's the stupidest thing in the world. I'm going to tell you, growing up near Stockton, they used to have an end of the year party, and my buddy was one that they contracted to go clean up everything. Oh my God, you wouldn't believe some of the stuff that we found that people just left. They went home. They left.
Really?
Saxophones and other stuff. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah,
we'll leave it at that. But Stockton's changed so much over the years.
Yeah.
But the communications degree. Why communications?
I think it's been my personality, and I always tell a funny story to people I'm talking to about this, or it could be a friend on the street or wherever it may be. And my mom always told me the story. She goes, when you were 2 years old, she goes, you talked to our dear friend, one of our, I forget the gentleman's name. He was a good friend of my parents. I think he was a doctor or whatever he may have been. And she goes, we put you on the phone with him because he had met me many times. Like I'm talking 2, 3, 4 years old. And I was having a full-out conversation with this man at 2 years old on the phone. And to this day, I still think about that story and my mom telling me that. And she goes, yeah, I don't know, you knew so. I mean, you had a lot of word. You had a good word bank at a young age. You talked like you were 30 years old. Yeah. I said, I don't know how. I came from you guys, but I mean, maybe that's it's somebody down the line had really good communication skills in our family.
I always say the mailman.
A mailman could talk like a motherfucker.
He used to come in and talk to mommy every day.
Well, luckily, no mailman, but I was told that story. So from that point on, having conversations at a young age, like very mature conversations. Like I was using like big boy words. I guess you can call them, not curse words, but just like I was just holding a conversation with adults. And that kind of carried with me through when I got older. And I've always liked to talk to people, and I've always liked to interact with people. And some people go, man, you're crazy. Like I can't stand people. I hate talking to people. People are a pain in my ass. How do you do it?
You were never in law enforcement if you like people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be difficult. I can imagine.
You see the worst of people. I always thought communication degrees were funny because it's not so much a communication degree, it's a listening degree.
Right.
You being able to react to what people are saying. I think that above anything else, I know some people who will talk and talk and talk, but they never listen to what you say. Where a good communicator, actually, their most powerful weapon is listening. Yeah. Did you develop that, or did you think you always had that?
I think a little bit of both. I think I always was a good listener, and I'm not gonna say I always was. I think at times I wasn't the best listener, but I think as I got older, and kind of what you said, Kevin, that's a great point about how the best characteristic you can have as a good speaker is the fact of listening, right? Because people can just talk and talk and talk for hours, right?
And get nothing across.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they could just talk and talk and love to hear themselves talk. But they won't listen.
100%. I tell people that the key to this show, what took me probably 3 or 4 episodes in the very beginning, was learning how to listen to people. I don't know how long it took you to get that.
I'm still getting there.
You're still getting there. But it took me a long time to communicate, because you got to forget that the microphone's here, you got to forget the camera's on, and you got to really get into the conversation. This is just a conduit in order to get it out to the world.
And you got to look ahead too. We got to get everything in within an hour.
Yeah.
And me and you, I mean, there are plenty of times we're at crunch time and we didn't even get to the gist of the story yet.
With
so
him,
to keep it flowing.
His is a little tougher. Yeah. He's on radio. The restrictions on radio, it was cool, but it was tough. Yeah. It was tough. I mean, you got 20 minutes here and you got a break. Remember John Wiley? Yeah. So John, Mike and I both did this radio show called Law Enforcement Today, and it's like, okay, we're going to do 9 minutes, break. We're going to do 9 minutes break, and then we're going to do 10 minutes break. And it was like, whoa.
Don't bring up brand names. Don't bring up this. Don't bring up that. Don't bring up this.
Don't curse. Don't do. It's like that's part of my lexicon now. But so do you enjoy the restrictions on radio? I'm sorry to jump ahead, but this is a good question. Do you enjoy those?
No, that's a great question. I do feel a lot of times I am limited. I like the idea of what I do like about radio is that it can be broadcasted, to a lot of local listeners, or anywhere anybody in the country can listen at a digital way. Be it they go on digitally on the line, they can listen to it. But I think there's restrictions. The restrictions can be a little difficult at times because, number one, you get you're timed. right? And like you kind of said, you got to get a commercial break when the bottom of the hour is coming up, and you got to move on to the end of the show commercials and move on to the next program. You kind of feel you got to wrap up quick. Whereas, you know, if it's just a kind of an open forum like your podcast here, you know, it's more relaxed, and you know, you can just kind of say whatever. You know, depending, you're not really on a huge time clock like you are on radio, but I try my best to structure that in. You know, I know my limits. I know my time frame. So doing radio a few years now, I've gotten better at it actually, where I can kind of manage the time, and I can let my guests know ahead of time, you know, okay, so this is what we're going to do at this time. Just to let you know, you can't do this, you can't say that. So the only thing I would say that I'm not a huge fan of are the restrictions, but I do like the fact that you can advertise on radio, and you can advertise on a podcast too, but you can spew commercials out. I think it's cool to give yourself a little break too in between at times if you need it, right?
How hard is it to keep from doing the old disc jockey? It's like, welcome back, and we're here again. We're going to spin a record. That's
you got to hit the post on a song.
I guarantee there's some times that you just want to rip into that old style radio voice.
Oh, like you wouldn't believe that. And that's going back to saying too, I like how I have a theme song to my show and the voiceover. Now let's get ready for the big man's report here on New Talk. I think that's really cool. I like how that's all constructed into it. The music coming in a commercial break, the music going out of commercial break. I like all that too. And that's pretty neat. And you know, I worked for Jerry Blavitt, R.I.P., the Geeter with the heater. Had a long run, 50 years at memory, 60 some years in the business as a disc jockey from Philadelphia. And my passion for music, which I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the music that I love just from listening and being there like with him working. You know, I have a thing for the oldies music, and people go, "Man, you're an old soul." Like you're
if you're on WOND, which has been around for probably 70 years.
Yeah,
you have to have done it because they've had. I can tell you some of the old disc jockeys on there. There's like Big Ange, Pinky's Corner, all those things I listened to as a kid.
See, I was a Pierre Robert guy.
Pierre Robert, I don't know that.
WMMR.
WMMR. Wow.
Or WMMR, right?
MMR, yeah. It was WMMR.
Pierre Robert.
But I'm sure it didn't start out like you didn't just jump on the radio one day. Was there an introduction? Did you work behind the scenes, try to learn the business a little bit?
I had a radio show, and I think my last year of college at Stockton, I did an internship, and I had my own radio show every Monday night where I was actually speaking a little bit, giving shout outs, talking about what's going around on campus, and then I would play music for the hour.
With the big board?
Yeah.
You have the big board in front of you?
Yeah. And I actually had
mixing board?
Another student beside me, and this young lady did it with me, and we did it every Monday because she was in my class. So I had some experience talking on the air in that sense, but it wasn't anything like having your own show. I mean, like in other words, what I mean by having my own show is it was more like there was more of a limits at the college. Okay, you can say a few words, but you can't make it a talk show. You have to play this music for local campus listeners, right? And then you have to be done at 8 o'clock. With my own show, a talk show, boom, live air, you're on. Okay, we're rolling. Now it's up to me. I have to direct the show. I have to talk now. I have to introduce my guests. I have to be able to lead the conversation.
If dead air happens on a college radio, it's no big deal. Dead air happens on WOND, it's a little bit bigger of a deal.
A little bit different. Yeah. Dead air on WOND can be frightening.
Yeah.
Dead air could be dead career.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing here. It's you got to try to keep the conversation moving along. And sometimes people across from us will say some horrible things. They're just whatever's going on in their life. They'll say some horrible things. And Mike and I, our initial reaction, it just happened. Was it last 2 weeks?
About 2 weeks.
2 weeks ago, we heard this thing. We're like, what? And we have to sit up and relax. We have to stay cognizant of what's going on in the conversation.
And you have to watch what you say because we just heard something that's devastating. And you can't come back with like, how'd you feel about that?
Well, it kind of hurt going in. But so you go from a college radio station. Now, did you intern anywhere, or did you jump right into radio, or did you have like an in between?
So after college, I did the internship, like I said, and then after college, I didn't go right into radio right away. I actually was kind of testing the waters to see what I wanted to do as a career. Now, I knew in my mind media is going to fall somewhere in line with what I want to do, whether it's part-time, whether I'm fortunate enough to get a full-time gig doing media somehow, whether it's production, learning the ropes behind the camera, and not even being necessarily on the camera or on the air right away. But I did not go right into it after college. I actually did finance for a few years. I've said, I had some friends that went in the finance business, and financial planning and all that stuff. And I said, you know what? It's lucrative, a lot of money. Let me see if I can, and I'm good with people. And that's the other thing too. Like I said, my personality might be good in as a financial planner, helping people develop retirement plans and 401ks and all that stuff. And not that I knew anything about finance, but I had the charisma, I had the personality. So
to fool them.
Well, I guess you could bullshit them along the way, right? Use BS word, right?
but you have to, if you're not doing something that you love, it's just, in my opinion, it's a slow death. Even if money's not involved, like when you're young, all you see is that almighty dollar. Like that's what I got to get a job, I got to get a house, I got to get a wife. You got to get and you hit all these different markers, but you're not exactly doing what you love,
right?
And it's okay to do what you don't love in order to get to that place, but as long as you have an overall goal. But if media fell somewhere in there, I'm sure if you stayed in finance, you would be doing some sort of media on finance or financial planning or something like that.
Yeah.
Because you always take what you're doing and try to work it into what you want to do. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a good point too. Someone has told me that in the past too. I've heard that, if you like media, if you like being on TV, radio, whatever the case may be, you can incorporate what you're doing in the meantime, like you said, Kevin, it's a great point, into the media, right? So when I was doing the finance, initially that wasn't my thought process. Media was kind of on the back burner for me. And I was just, I went and did the testing. I studied for the courses. I got the, the life and annuities licenses, and I did the cold calling and all that. And after about 6 months, I said, you know what? I made a little bit of money. I didn't hit that big prize yet. I didn't hit that big break where I'm making, $500,000 as a financial planner, which I'm sure there's some with years of experience who do very well in financial planning. I know that for a fact. But some just told me no, it's not my niche. It's not what I want to do. And I kind of was a little nervous. I was like, well, shit, what am I going to do now?
Now what?
I said, let me get into what I know best other than media. And that was athletics. And something I saw was, let me get into coaching. Right. And I reached out to a couple places, local high schools, where I grew up, where I played, coaches that I knew in the area who maybe were looking for assistant coaches, just get my feet wet. And that's exactly what I did. And I got fortunate enough to be able to get an assistant coaching job at Wildwood Catholic High School down in Cape May Courthouse. And I kind of took on the coaching, status from there, where I went back into youth, education, and I started, coaching at a high school level, and then I was brought into the school district down at Wildwood Catholic. And I was kind of fortunate at the time because I didn't have any kind of job, any kind of income coming in. So I said, what am I going to do now? So, I long-term sub for a little bit. And then that's when I started my stint as an assistant varsity basketball coach at Wildwood Catholic. And then they brought me in the building, offered me a job to teach kids basic skills and kind of help them with their work. And, students that had different plans, whether it be form of autism, form of any kind of special education. I worked with those kind of students for 2.5 years. So that's what kind of led me on my journey to media. And what's kind of funny is you figure, how can, you never know how you're going to end up in a certain thing. How could teaching or how could coaching get you into media, right? And it's just one door closed, another door opens. One door closed, another opens. So I'm learning as I go along. Never say no to an opportunity, kind of grab the bull by the horns and just see where it goes.
Yeah,
working with the special needs kids, that's challenging and rewarding all at the same time.
The challenges of that are extremely tough. We have a lot of friends who are parents of children with special needs, and the daily stuff that they go through, they talk about it, but they talk about it with pride. And I'm sitting here going, holy cow, how do you do it? How do you deal with that?
I say it all the time. I'm on the Law Enforcement Torture Run Committee for Special Olympics New Jersey. And we deal with, Special Olympics athletes all the time. And the parents come up and thank us. I said, no, thank you. Yeah. To me, it's only a couple hours. For you, it's 24/7.
Right.
That's.
Was it ever a thought in your mind where you say, this feels pretty good? This might be it?
I got joy out of it. But then you also have your parts where, man, it's tough to deal with, and it wasn't special needs kids. I did get joy out of working with the kids. And I was kind of lucky. I don't want to use the word lucky, but the special needs that the children I worked with, it wasn't like a severe form of special need. If I might say that correctly, it was more like a kind of on the spectrum where they're learned a little bit slower than the other students, right? And I don't want to say, comparing students that, can't do it compared to other students, because all the students at the end of the day are the same. Just maybe one student needs a little bit more time with their work, right? Needs a little bit more time grasping the material. And I did get joy about helping those kids in that particular sense, right? Because and people always told me along the way, and it wasn't for those people I wasn't doing it. I did it because I enjoyed it. When I feel like I can help someone or help a child.
Well, it's the same thing as coaching.
Yeah.
It's the same joy that you're helping kids along.
Yeah.
Whatever their journey may be.
Yeah. And the biggest thing I always told myself is I was in their shoes at one point, whether it was I had a bad day at school. I had a bad day on the basketball court. Man, I had a shitty game. I got an F on that test. I know what it's like to be. I mean, we all do. Yeah. And that's one of the things, I
know it all too well.
Yeah, but as you get older, I will say this, as you get older, the distance between remembering what that's like becomes further and further to where you get reminded every once in a while, but you do the long-term memory isn't there the way it was when because I was a high school teacher, but I left because I couldn't stand the other teachers. That was a different story. Right. I love the kids. I couldn't stand the other teachers. Awful.
But you brought up a great point. Teaching is a lot like coaching. It really is. You're really coaching the kids in academics.
Yeah.
As well as coaching in athletics. It's really the same thing.
Yeah, but how long did you stayed there for 2 years, you said?
I stayed there about two and a half years.
Why leave?
At the time when I was transitioning, I was looking for maybe a job that was a little bit more of a better pay. So it was more of a kind of a monetary thing for me. I was, my mid-20s, late 20s, and I'm looking to do something where I'm making a little bit more money. And I was able to land a job at another high school where I was teaching full-time English, which, I didn't go to school to be a teacher. I kind of learned the ropes through experience. I had some credits in college through, for certain educational credits that could apply to teaching. But I was not trained. I didn't student teach. I didn't do any of that stuff. A lot of it, I just, I taught them myself on my own. But the reason for leaving was more of a monetary thing where I wanted to see if I can expand, my education, go to another educational institution, make more money, and maybe try something different. I thought it was great giving back to kids in any way, especially kids with those learning disabilities. I like to use the learning disabilities. That's really what it was. Yeah. They had a little bit, of a slower learning disability, and I was able to be that person for them to help them. And it made me feel good. And I didn't leave for any of the actual job reasons. It was more just because I was looking forward to better my career in the educational field, get more experience, and maybe teach another subject.
Yeah, but now you're in the educational field again.
Yeah.
And are you ever starting to worry that you get a little stuck in there?
My goal and my long-term outlook, and it's a terrific question. I'm kind of like looking at my clock right now with what I'm doing with my life and my career. And I've had thoughts of that. If I stay in the education system too long, is it going to take away from what I want to do ultimately in my life? And the way I'm handling that and the kind of things I tell myself is, and I've had a great conversation with people about this, family, friends, very close friends of mine, and they kind of say, you take it as it comes, right? And it's hard to listen to that. Like, oh, well, hey, I'm going to be so-and-so. I'm going to be so-and-so age soon, Yeah. I'm looking to start a family.
That's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
You got that right.
Yeah.
And that's another thing too. Like, guys my age, so there's some guys that have great jobs, but they never bought a house yet. They're just saving money, stocking money away, living at home. And then there's some guys that already started a family, maybe have a kid on the way, or they already have 2 kids and they're married and they have their own house, bought a house with their spouse. So I'm looking at myself, I'm like, am I on the right trajectory here? Am I behind? Am I doing something wrong? And that's the last couple of years, I'll be honest, that's something that I've been looking at myself and it's kind of like an inner battle, inner struggle a little bit. Like, should I be worried or should I be happy that I have that luxury of quote unquote, what direction am I going to go? Because not everyone has that time to kind of buy, if that makes sense, right?
But you're able to do the world of media and still be in the education system. You're like that's a possibility. Mike and I both have this. We'd love to do this full time. We would love to do it. And if it comes, it comes. But we also got to a point, because we've had conversations about this. We don't really care. Yeah. We don't really care. As long as we can pay for the show, we're good.
In the beginning, we wanted to open up a studio in Aruba. Remember?
Yeah, well, yeah, that would be great. Remote podcast from everywhere in the world. Blake was asking me today, he's like, do you do Zoom? Yeah, we're capable, but we prefer not to, unless our studio opens up in Aruba.
Yeah.
Then we talked about that at the very beginning.
Then you might have to do Zoom.
I would have to do
unless
Zoom.
We're you're getting paying for these flights for these people to come to your studio.
We just buy a jet, but at that listen, if that time comes, we'll have a jet.
Well, Andrew will get his pilot's license and fly.
A&J Airways. Oh God. So while you're teaching, when did the opportunity come up to get involved once again in radio?
And how did it come up?
So I was actually, like you said, I was teaching. My mother, she owns a fitness gymnastics facility down in South Jersey in Northfield. And she's been in business for over, I want to say 37, 38 years now, roughly. And she's
it's not the one on Tilton Road, is it?
Yes. Well, it's off of Tilton. It's Mill Road.
Mill Road. Okay.
Yeah, Mill Road. The big yellow, looks like a warehouse, but it's been there for 40 years.
You weren't a gymnast when you were growing up, right?
No. I'm not seeing you doing the rings. You're not doing the rings or the horse. It's not happening.
Tried one class. That was
the pommel horse.
The horse got pommeled. That's what happened.
The first and the last time after when I was younger.
And I guarantee you were never a jockey either.
No.
World's tallest jockey. That's what it is.
I'd feel bad for the horse if that was the case.
The horse would be riding you.
It's like Mongo. You drive in on a bull. Yeah.
So she still has the facility, still has the business. And there was a lady that reached out to her because she works with young athletes, gymnasts all day long, from ages 2, 3, all the way up to like a senior in high school, even some adult classes as well. And she'd been doing it a long time, and a woman reached out to her and said, Tracy, I know you're in the local area. I do a show over at WOND about nutrition and how you should take care. She's a nutritionist. How do you take care of your body? The ins and outs of your dieting and all that stuff. What you should eat, what you shouldn't eat, and we hear this all the time. But it's really just kind of listening to this lady's show, and I've actually happened to become a good friend of hers. Terrific woman, and terrific program that she runs every Sunday, I believe, from like 2 to 4. And she does something during the week as well. So she invited my mom on the show. And she talked to when they did like the background call and kind of the screening, I guess you could say, before coming on the show, kind of setting everything up. She kind of said, my mom kind of was always thinking to me. She goes, I have a son who's a college athlete. And he played high school basketball in the area. He would also be interested in your program. Not saying if you have room for him, if he's got to come on, whatever the case may be. But she was kind of throwing it out there, kind of because she said yes to the show. But then when she thought athletic sports, she thought of me too. Mom.
You always want to give your son a bump up. Yeah.
Yeah. She had a proud mom moment, right? Anyway, the woman was very open to it. And she said, Tracy, how about this? Why don't you and your son come in together? And we'll do and you guys do the show together. So that's what happened. I went in with my mom, and we had a mutual discussion with the woman on her show about nutrition, and I actually coached camps when I was younger, like out of college in the summer. I'd come home and I'd run camps, youth ages, and we would do like basketball training for like a couple hours and stuff like that. So I was kind of giving back as a college athlete to the younger kids. And I knew what it was like being an athlete, how you have to hydrate yourself, what you can and can't eat when you're training and all that stuff, right? Even though it's hard to stay on that course nowadays.
You got that.
And I'm way off, but I got to get myself back.
and the weight doesn't stay off as much when you're older, believe
it. It takes a little more time to get it off, yeah. But so you're in there, and how did it feel?
It was in the first couple minutes. It kind of felt a little different. Like I'm like, okay, like this is what I like. I did that radio show at Stockton. It was cool being behind the mics, but now it's not really just playing music. Now I got to actually talk and speak. So the first couple minutes, I was a little a little nervous, a little bit, to be able, when she was asking me questions and am I going to sound well? How am I going to sound on the mic, right? So it kind of went free flowing. I enjoyed it. And then she actually invited me back for another show, I would say a couple months later. And this time it was just me. Sorry, Mom. But she liked you too. Don't
Kick
worry.
your mom right to the curb. Go ahead.
Mom is a stepping stone.
And then I had my own show with her, and it was just talking about, now it was training the young. It went from training the young kids and my experience as a college athlete to training the high school kids as a varsity coach at Wildwood Catholic. And then we went into what does a typical practice day look like. So we had another conversation about nutrition and what am I doing with the kids and all that. So at the end of the show, long story short, she goes, you know, I've been thinking about this, Blake. And I said, what's that, Nancy? She goes, you know, you have a voice for radio. Did everyone ever tell you that? And I was like,
we have a face for radio. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I said, did anyone ever tell you that? And I said, well, I've heard it a couple times, but you were the first one to actually really kind of take interest in me when you said that, you know? But she was like the first one to really say, you know, you have a voice in radio. And I was like, wow, I kind of like, do I sound that good? Do I say, like, you know, how do I sound?
What are you talking about?
Yeah. Can I be the next David Letterman or a host show or whatever? But, you know, I was saying to myself, wow, this is pretty cool. So she was telling me this and she goes, well, how about this? I said, would you be interested in having your own show? And I said, yeah. I said, actually, I would. Something I thought about for the last couple of years. And she put me in contact with the general manager of the show or the station for WOND. And I had a meeting with him. We set up some emails, and then I actually met with him face to face and pitched my idea to him of what I wanted my show to be about and what the name would be, right? And and the funny thing about the name, as you know, the Big Man's Report Live, I kind of said to myself, I said, what am I going to call this show, right? The daily roundup, or the daily roundup with Blake Rosell, or the Big Man Show, or the Big Man Show, the Big Man's Report. Wait, the Big Man's Report Live. And I just kind of rung a bell. So it all worked out, you know, and I'm happy, and I'm still grateful to this day. And I still talk to Nancy all the time. And, you know, we talk a little bit about, you know, the shows and how everything's going. So that's what got me into the radio station, was to have that meeting with the general manager of the station. And he liked my idea about pitching the show. And here I am today, 3 years later.
Just rings a bell sometimes. You've spoken to a lot of people. I see you spoke to Kellyanne Conway. I did some research on you. You spoke to some decent sized names. Peter Gaudio, who I'm friends with as well. Mm-hmm. He's a very generous man. Is there one that stands out on you where it just wowed you? Not to diminish your other guests. So if they're listening, I'm not diminishing your other guests.
They don't listen to the show. Yeah, don't worry about it.
I've been fortunate enough to like have some really cool people on, and even sometimes myself, I'm like thinking to myself, like, wow, do I have this? I can't believe I have this guest on, or I'm going to have this guest on next week. Like if I'm watching movies as a young kid and I see maybe an actor on the screen that maybe I had the chance to talk to, you know, last year or a couple months ago, I'm like, wow, it's pretty cool. I think one of the first ones what you mentioned first, Kellyanne Conway. I thought that was interesting just because, I mean, she was a big name, you know, obviously.
Jersey girl.
Yeah, Jersey girl. And matter of fact, she actually graduated from St. Joseph High School then in Hammonton.
No kid.
She grew up in
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where I just taught the past couple of years, she was a alumni there. I think class of '85. I think.
Home of Chris Tortu. Chris Tortu played at Syracuse. He was in my age range. Played at Syracuse. I think he got signed by one in the NFL.
Lou Alcindor was in my age range.
So what was specifically about Kellyanne Conway or is it Conway?
Conway.
What was so specific about her that just wowed you? Was it her star power, or was it something about her personality?
Well, actually both. I was a little nervous for that interview. Like my very first interview I ever did on my first season of the Big Man's Report Live, I was a little nervous, but then ever since then, it became natural, and now it's like super natural, it's like brushing my teeth now, and you know, because I've practiced it, I've rehearsed it, and it feels really good to be on the air, and I'm used to it. But I had her only a summer, and weeks leading up to it, I'm like, man, I got to get questions prepared. I mean, this woman, she's sharp.
Exactly.
She's on Fox News National 4 or 5 days a week at least. Matter of fact, I was just scrolling through the channels yesterday, and she was on in the afternoon yesterday. You know, everything with the elections and all that stuff. So she's busy right now, and I thought it was pretty. I just seen her on TV all the time, and I think a little bit of her star power, like you said, Kevin. And she was a big name, and she still is a big name. Very big name. But during presidency a few years ago, she was huge, doing the White House briefings and all that stuff.
She's easy on the eyes as well, which doesn't hurt.
No, no, not at all.
Stay focused. Stay focused. Stay focused.
And I had the pleasure of meeting her, obviously in person many times, and we were at a function together. She did a speech for and like it was called a gala function last year for St. Joe's when it was at a country club down in Haddonfield. We had a really nice evening. Got to speak with her and her family, meet her family. And I met her on a couple occasions where she used to come into Memories of Margate, as a matter of fact, Jerry Blavitz. And before I get to my next point, what I want to say about that was I remember she used to come in a couple summers in a row. She used to have the Secret Service come in with her, and these guys be dressed up like they were just random guys hanging out, right? Maybe and you weren't supposed to know who they were, but they came in, and then she would dance with her girlfriends, and I got to speak to her a couple times there as the head of security. I got to escort her in and anything she needed. So it was pretty cool to have her on my show for that regard. Like I met her, a couple years prior. But now and I didn't have the talk show yet at that point when I met her. I was still in college. But now, fast forward to like 3 or 4 years later, and I have the show. I'm like, wow, this woman's going to come on my program. But the limelight of being the center of attention on Fox and all the interviews she's done, and her name in the presidency, and also the last thing I'm going to say about her was actually speaking with her. She is very, very intelligent from what I can tell, and obviously. A lot of what the way she would present herself and the way she would carry herself, I actually had to really kind of key in and listen. I didn't want to miss something. She spoke very fast, spoke very clear, and spoke very educated. So it wasn't just all about having Kelly and Conway on the program. Her as a person and her intelligence behind and her knowledge behind her subject and her craft was phenomenal.
Could be intimidating.
A little bit.
Certain guests bring your game up.
Yeah.
Certain guests will elevate your game. You try to match their level of engagement. It's something that's very, very hard to explain. And if some people can't do it.
Yeah.
Some people just can't do it, and that's fine. But when you get that one person, we've had it in here. You get that one person, and it's engaging and stuff. You don't ever want it to end.
Yeah.
And I imagine that would be like with her.
Yeah, and it was she. I remember one time it was hard to get like a date because she was out of the country doing some work and stuff, and I thought it was hard to get her. So I worked it out with her administrative assistant, and I was able to book her on the show. And I'm like, wow, this is gonna be so cool. And it was there was also just like some fine line too, like with her being who she was. I couldn't just advertise or promote that she was gonna be on the show every day. I had to wait till like 2 weeks out. Yeah. It had to be very particular. There were certain guidelines with that. And one thing that she said to me, which I thought was pretty cool, one of the first things she said to me when we signed on the show, and for that show, and no disrespect to any other guests I ever had, because I like everyone equally who I had on my show. Every conversation was great and unique in their own special way. But for when I had her on, I actually put on a suit. I put on like a red tie. I tried to look like, I guess you could say, I look patriotic for the occasion. And I done it all up, in a certain way and then one of the things she said to me was, she goes, oh, and finally we're glad we got to do this. She goes, I must say, Blake, she goes, I've never been on the small man's podcast before. So being on the big man's podcast is pretty cool. I thought that was fun.
That's a soundbite and a half that you're going to get.
Yeah.
Where do you see this radio show going? Or what's your hopes of, you want to go further? You want to bring it national? You want to bring it, like if you had a crystal ball, where would it be?
If I had a crystal ball, down the road, I want this to be like a national talk show. And, and I've heard people in my ears saying, hey, keep this up. You could be so-and-so. You could be the next Joe Rogan. You could be and then I hear that all as a encouragement. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But that's, to get to that point, I always tell myself, stay consistent at what I'm doing. Don't get off key. Don't get off course. If one show, doesn't really have a lot of views or doesn't have a lot of listeners or a lot of positive feedback, who cares? Right.
We fretted on that for a long time.
And you guys in this business too, you guys are very, do a great job at what you do. And you guys can probably attest to the same thing.
Oh,
right?
It's pressure. It's pressure. But what we learned is instead of being, because we've heard that too, oh, you could be the next Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
We just want to be the first us. That's all we want to do. That's all we want to do.
Well, that's the one thing I was going to say too, just be yourself. Yeah. When you start, like this is dressed up for us. We talked about this when we started on camera. What are we going to wear? Are we going to wear collar shirt? That's not us.
That's not us.
Yeah.
That's not us. I drive a 2005 Jeep with 213,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
I'm not.
You want the license plate? I'll give it out over the air.
I got it. I know it. You know, it's not us. This is who we are.
Yeah.
You know, I came in with slides. I took them off already. I'm sitting here barefoot.
And
that's who I am.
Right. And that's an important thing, too, that I always thought about. Like, I don't want to have to feel like I'm being someone I'm not, right?
Exactly.
I want to be natural behind the mic. I want to be natural with my guests. You know, and hey, listen, if down the road I don't get to that, you know, like a national syndicate, I never get, you know, where I'm going.
As long as you're enjoying it.
Yeah. Hey, if I'm having fun doing it,
yeah,
and I could tell some pretty cool stories of my kids, you know, 15 years down the road or whatever. Hey, you know, your pop, he had a pretty cool talk show back in the day. He had some cool people on. No way, Dad, you did? You had that guy on your show?
We know we talk about it a couple times. Like, I don't have any like home videos of like my mother who passed away in 2011. You know, like, just to hear her voice one more time, you know, would be really meaningful to me.
Right.
You know, now your voice is going to be out there forever.
Yeah,
for
your
kids
voice
to
is
hear
going to be out there. My voice is going to be out there.
Forever.
And so when we're off this planet, you know, so whoever our next generation is going to be able to listen to us.
Yeah. Where
can we find you? Why don't you throw out some plugs? Where can we find Big Man's Report Live first?
So I always direct people to go to even on my own show, to my Instagram page, the Big Man's Report _live. That's where I post my daily, you know, who's going to be on the show coming up. And, you know, I do a daily outlook, a weekly outlook, I should say. Sometimes I do a monthly outlook if I can book a few months in advance. So my Instagram is like my sanctuary where I have all my posts, who I had on, and little clips to kind of like teasers, and you know, to who I had on and who's going to be on, and that's my main source, I would say. If you want to listen to the show, you know, if you want to listen to it live, 92.3 FM. It's in South Jersey based, obviously, so 92.3 FM. And if you can't catch it locally, if you're not in the area, you can listen to it online, digitally, which I always tell my viewers and my listeners, www.wondradio.com, and just click listen live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. I go live. And also my YouTube channel. So if you missed a show, okay, if you miss it, you want to, I missed the Big Man Show this week. Where can I go and get it? You go to my YouTube channel, The Big Man Show Live on YouTube. All right, and I post all my videos there weekly. After I have them, the on-air interview, I always do. I kind of do all my chop it up and do what I got to do, and it'll be on there. You know, I'll do my. You get the final product on my YouTube channel. You can see that. You know, and I always direct people where to go. Obviously, when the show's ready to be released on YouTube, if they miss it live, I always direct them when to go on, when it's going to be released, and kind of give them the update. So YouTube and my Instagram are my big things right now. I did a little bit of TikTok in the beginning. I kind of steered away from it, not for any bad reason at all. I just haven't had time to upload to TikTok as well.
It's a lot.
It's
a lot. I do them all, and it's exhausting sometimes. But I'm grateful because it's a way for me to push the show out with Mike and I and really get the word out. So Blake, we're coming to the end of this thing, and I can't thank you enough for telling us what you told us.
Thank you for having me on.
I try to end it in every way because you've taken this journey and you're immersed in the minutia. You're getting to where you really love, but there's some pains to it. What do you think all that process has taught you?
You know, you got to be able to handle adversity. I was always taught that as an athlete. I was always taught that as a student. And I was always taught that as a child, right, of my parents. You have to just take the good with the bad, right? I'm gonna have bad days, gonna have good days. If I'm at my lowest point in my life, I can't always say to myself, this is what it's going to be like forever. So I think I have to keep constantly searching. It's teaching me to, if one thing fails, it's okay. On to the next thing, right? You know, don't harp on the one thing that didn't go well, the one thing that went sour, the one relationship that went bad, the one job that maybe wasn't what you thought it was, the one friend who you thought was your friend but wasn't your friend at the end of the day. All those things you can't harp on because, you know what, at the end of the day, life goes on and life is short, you know? And I don't want to sound cliche by saying that, but that's the way I truly feel. I think I have to keep look for the good opportunities, understand the bad ones, take them as learning lessons, and keep going forward. And I think that's been like what you say, quote unquote, what's my suffering? Well, you know, finding out what I'm going to do in media, how am I going to navigate this thing? How am I going to make money? How am I going to get a house? All these things is my way of internal battles, but it's not going to stop me from where I want to get at the end of the day.
Just keep doing what you love, and all the rest will follow.
If you love what you're doing, you never work a day in your life.
This is the truth. Blake, thank you so much for coming in. We really do appreciate it. Another South Jersey guy in the house. I'm always proud to have them down. Always.
And this is really interesting. This is really cool to be on another show. I'm always the interviewer. Right?
It's hard to turn the tables.
Yeah,
it is.
And this is actually really neat to be the one interviewed, and I really enjoyed it. So I want to thank you both again for having me on.
Now you know how the guest feels, and now you know how the interview. You know how the interviewer feels. Now you know how the guest feels. So now you get a little.
That's why in doctor school, believe it or not, that's why when you study to become a doctor, you must become a patient. It's part of the curriculum now to give a little bit of empathy.
Do they operate on each other and everything?
Yeah, well, they give proctology exams. That's what they do. That's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast, the Suffering of the Big Man with Blake Rosell. And let's think about all the stuff that we learned. Takes time to grow into your body. A turn in your career can show you your path. Thank God for mom's push. Take the good days with the bad days, but most importantly, be the first you. That's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget to join the subscription channel on YouTube. Follow us on all social media. That's Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, Clapper, all the rest of them. OnlyFans. Don't forget to follow Mike at Mike_Failace. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. And, of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. And we will see you on the next episode.